This is 13 FO 3060, State of Wisconsin versus Leslie Peterson. The appearances.
Peter Rank for the State of Wisconsin.
Your Honor, Leslie Peterson appears in person, represented by Eric Schulenberg.
Okay. And we're set for trial today, so the state can proceed.
We call Joseph Husar.
Okay. If you'd come right up to the green witness chair, I'll swear you in. Have a seat. Sorry. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Tell us your first name and your last name and spell both of them.
First name is Joseph, Joseph, Husar, Husar.
All right. Go ahead.
And Mr. Husar, you're currently retired, correct?
Yes,
How were you previously employed?
I was employed by the State of Wisconsin's Department of Justice.
And what was your job?
I was an investigator with the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit.
And when did you retire?
June 30th, 2014.
And prior to being employed by the State of Wisconsin, how were you employed?
I retired from the City of Milwaukee Police Department after 25 years of service.
And I guess when you retired, what was your rank?
I was a detective.
Okay. I'm going to take you back to August 19th of 2013. You were employed by the Department of Justice at that time?
Yes,
And had you been given an assignment to go over to the state capitol during that time period?
yes.
And what was that assignment?
I was directed to go over there and monitor the Solidarity Singers, not their conduct, but the conduct of the visitors who were in the rotunda at the time that the Solidarity Singers were performing.
So you were collecting facts.
Yes, yes.
And
I'm sorry, when was that, what date did you say, or dates?
August, I believe this date is August 19th, 2013.
Okay, thanks.
And were you at the Capitol more than one day performing that assignment?
Yes,
But you were at the Capitol on August 19th, 2013?
yes.
And where were you when you were at the Capitol over the noon hour?
Ultimately, I would walk around the perimeter of the rotunda, as I said earlier, observing visitors to the Capitol, their reactions to what was taking place. So I would move around, sometimes stay on the ground floor, sometimes I'd move up to the first floor.
Okay. On August 19th, what did you observe going on in the rotunda over the noon hour?
There were singing going on. It was quite crowded. And there were visitors in the area of the information booth.
Sorry.
During the course of my observations, I would be there. I would arrive sometime shortly after noon. I wouldn't necessarily stay all the way to the end, but on this particular day, around 12:40, I believe it was, the Capitol Police were active, and they were executing some detentions / arrests.
Okay.
At about that time.
And you said that was at about 12:40?
Correct.
Okay. And approximately how many people were in the rotunda during the noon hour?
I would estimate over 100.
Okay. And you'd mentioned the Capitol Police were making detentions or arrests. Did you observe what reaction the crowd in the rotunda had when police would arrive in the rotunda or make a detention or an arrest?
Well, they seem to focus their attention on the activities of the officers, and especially when they would move in the direction of the inner rotunda where the singers were doing their thing.
Would the crowd congregate around them?
Yes.
Would people move across the room to try to get to that scene?
There was some movement.
Okay. And were you involved in any way in the Capitol Police activities?
No.
Did you attempt to stay out of the way of the
Yes.
Capitol Police? And so I'm going to take you to around that 12:40 time when you mentioned that Capitol Police were being active. Did somebody make physical contact with you at that time?
Yes.
Can you explain what happened?
I was in the vicinity of the information booth, not directly by it, and I was making observations, and I noticed that the Capitol Police had moved to the middle of the rotunda, and so I was repositioning myself, just walking. I think it would be in like a northerly direction. At which point in time, I didn't see it coming, but suddenly I got ran into. Somebody hit me, ran into my left side, jolted me to the point the impact caused me to step back on my left side, and I felt an immediate sharp pain to my shoulder area. At which point in time, I made an observation as to who had done this, and I noticed that it was a female with dark clothing, a camera, appeared to have some kind of press credentials. It appeared that she was moving in the direction in which the Capitol Police were escorting some of the people that they were detaining out of the rotunda area. This person, after running into me, never even stopped to ask if I was okay or to excuse herself, just seemed intent upon reaching the area where the Capitol Police were taking these people.
And do you recognize the person who knocked you
Yes, I do.
in the courtroom today?
Yes.
Could you identify her briefly?
She's seated at the table to your right, has a lighter colored sweater, black dress.
For the record, he's identifying the defendant.
Any objection?
I heard him do it. No objection.
Okay. And you said that after she had knocked you back, that she just kind of kept on going towards the action. Is that an accurate description?
Yes.
And you'd also mentioned that you kind of felt a jolt. Did you experience pain?
Yes, I did.
And when you got knocked back, did you hit anybody else?
No,
as
I
you got
did not.
knocked back?
No.
And I guess, what did you do after you were knocked back on that day?
I just stepped to the side to get out of the way because I didn't know if anybody else was moving in that direction that I didn't see, and I didn't want to obstruct anybody's movement. Had I seen this person that ran into me coming, I would have certainly stepped out of the way to allow that person to proceed, but I never saw them come.
So you didn't react, I mean, you retaliated in any way, you didn't react?
No,
in
I
any
did
way.
not.
And did you stay at the rotunda to continue your observations for a time, or?
Yes, I did.
And about how long?
10, 15 minutes.
And did you then return to the office?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you do upon returning to the office regarding the incident?
I advised my supervisor of the fact that I had sustained some slight injury while monitoring the activities in the Capitol, and a report was filled out relative to the injury.
Okay. Okay. Approach.
Okay.
You got this?
That's my.
I can just hand it to him after it's mine. Sure, if you have one, yeah. Okay, we've marked as Exhibit 1 and employer's first report of injury that's dated 8/19/2013 with reference to Joseph Hussar. I'll hand that to the witness.
And after you have a moment to review that, do you recognize what this is?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's an employee's first report of injury relative to the incident that occurred on August 19th, 2013.
And you filled this out?
Yes.
And is it a true and correct copy except for the redacted personal identifying information?
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to move Exhibit 1 into the record.
I have no objection.
It's received.
And you, excuse me, you described the injury description in this report. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And I guess, could I have you read that injury description?
Monitoring activity within the Wisconsin Capitol Rotunda, in parentheses, Solidarity Singers, when unknown white female with camera running to catch up with police who were transporting an individual ran into my left side, parentheses, shoulder area, causing me to stumble backwards and immediately experience a sharp pain to my left shoulder. The woman continued to pursue the police officers and did not stop to see if I had been injured by her conduct.
Okay, thank you. And why did you submit a notice of first injury?
Because I had experienced an injury.
Okay. And did you report this incident to anybody else besides your supervisor?
After reporting it to my supervisor, he encouraged me to contact the Capitol Police to make them aware of what had occurred, and I did do that.
You did do that?
Yes.
And did you make any additional contact with the police regarding this incident?
Sometime later, I don't know whether it was within a week or two, they were trying to identify the person who had ran into me. And while I was monitoring the activity, I observed Lieutenant Bob Sluey of the Capitol Police in the rotunda. He was in uniform, at which time I approached him, and I did identify the individual that ran into me on August 19th to Lieutenant Sluey, and he recognized that person.
And again, you identified the defendant, Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Beyond your supervisor encouraging you to report this incident, why did you feel like you needed to report this incident either to your supervisor or to the police?
I felt it was, the conduct was out of character, because in the environment that existed, when an individual runs into somebody else and never even acknowledges that type of activity, that could ultimately cause another individual, somebody else, to retaliate in a manner to defend themselves. There were children over the time that I'd been there. There were senior citizens in the Capitol from time to time. There were groups that would be there, and sometimes they would be on the sidelines just observing what was going on. And had they been the recipient of this conduct, it's unknown how somebody could have responded to that.
And in your experience as a police officer for 25 years, have you been in other situations where there are large crowds of whether it be protesters or even concert goers or any type of situation where there's a large number of people?
Yes.
And in those crowd control situations, and in your experience as a police officer, do you think it's a risk, safety of others, potentially causing disturbances, or a heightened risk to crowd control safety to run through the crowd?
Yes.
Is it a heightened risk to safety or to crowd control to have someone run through and strike somebody else?
Yes.
And why is that?
As I said earlier, an individual that was the recipient of this type of a conduct, first of all, the injury Second of all, the potential for retaliation, whether it's verbal or physical, it escalates, it could potentially escalate into a more difficult situation for law enforcement to control.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Before we go any further, just for planning, does the state have other witnesses?
No, it does not.
So this is the entirety of the state's evidence?
This is the entirety of the state's
You are
evidence.
excused, you can be seated. Let me hear the state's closing argument right now.
Sure, Your Honor. Your Honor, sorry,
Go ahead.
I was just waiting for Mr.
Oh.
Peterson. Ms. Peterson ran through the crowded rotunda to get to the action. She knocked back another individual, causing him injury. This is our contention, other disorderly conduct, which tends to provoke a disturbance. When you run through a crowded situation in which we have a number of people trying to get at the arresting officers, attempting to swarm to those arresting officers, you have a protest or solidarity sing-along situation in which you have heightened tensions between police officers and the crowd. When you have somebody running through that situation and knocking into others and causing that disturbance, it tends to provoke or could potentially provoke a retaliation and an escalation of that crowd situation, which would cause a disturbance. Accordingly, this is other disorderly conduct to the extent that societal norms suggest that we don't run through crowded areas, we don't knock into other people, and if we do, and if it is an accident, then we stop and ensure the person's well-being, we ensure that they're okay, and we ensure that we don't provoke them to retaliate or escalate a situation which is already heightened in terms of emotion and disturbance. Ms. Peterson, through the testimony of Mr. Hussar, broke those societal norms by knocking into him. In this instance, he did not retaliate, in part because he's a trained professional who was taken aback by the fact that he had been struck, and also because he happened to not knock into somebody else. That being said, running through a crowded situation in with a heightened environment of protest tends to provoke a disturbance.
This doesn't even rise to the level of probable cause, let alone the greater weight of the credible evidence that is required as the state's burden in this case. A person is moving quickly through a crowd towards a point at which the police are conducting some activity. By the witness's testimony, no indication of any intent to run into him. Carelessness or incidental contact causes some pain to the person when they collide, and no disturbance results from it. There's no indication that anyone else was affected by this accidental contact in a crowded situation. There's simply no basis on this evidence on which I would find a person guilty of disorderly conduct for moving quickly in a crowded situation and accidentally bumping into someone. The case is dismissed.
Your Honor, may I make a statement for the record?
You can make a statement for the record if you like. I've issued my decision.
This is not a criminal prosecution of disorderly conduct, and so there's no intent element to this.
That's fine.
Okay.
I was just pointing out the fact that there is no evidence. Had there been some evidence perhaps of intent, then I would consider it otherwise disorderly conduct that might tend to cause or provoke a disturbance where someone intentionally strikes another person, shoves another person in that kind of situation, where someone simply bumps into another person in a crowded situation. To charge that even as a civil forfeiture disorderly conduct is really without foundation. Case is dismissed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That's